The classroom was full before the clock even struck 10. Students leaned forward in their chairs, notebooks open, eyes set on the front. It wasn't just any math lecture. This was Professor Harlan's class. The man was a legend, a sharp tongue with a sharper mind, known for tearing students apart before piecing them back together. Those who survived his course walked out either brilliant or broken. Today, there was a buzz in the air. Not because of a new formula or theory, but because a man who wasn't on the roster sat quietly in the back row. He wore a black hoodie, old jeans, and had a stillness about him that didn't belong to a college student. Some whispered his name. Others just stared. Keanu Reeves. No one knew why he was here. He didn't speak, didn't move, just listened. As if the math on the board mattered more than anything else in the world. Professor Harlan noticed him within minutes. He always did. Nothing escaped him. He paused mid-equation and narrowed his eyes. The lecture hall fell into a hush. "We have a visitor," Harlan said dryly. "Mr. Reeves, I presume?" Keanu looked up, nodded once, soft and respectful. The professor chuckled. "I didn't realize Hollywood actors had a passion for calculus." A few students laughed, not cruelly, just nervously. Keanu didn't smile, didn't blink. He said nothing. Harlan turned back to the board. "Let's give our guest something to think about." He wrote a long, complex equation, something that twisted into itself like a knot. Variables wrapped around integrals, limits pressed tight against Greek letters. It wasn't from the textbook. It wasn't from anywhere. "Solve this," he said, tapping the chalk hard against the last line. "Anyone?" The room went still. Keanu stared at it. Not with confusion, not with fear, just with focus. Deep, endless focus. But he didn't raise his hand. He didn't move. And Harlan smiled to himself, satisfied. "As I thought." The lecture moved on. Hours passed. The board was wiped clean. But in the back row, Keanu kept glancing at the empty space where the unsolved equation had once been. Something about it sat heavy in him, like an itch he couldn't ignore. After class, the students rushed out, chattering, laughing, relieved. But Keanu stayed. Alone in the empty lecture hall, he walked up to the board slowly. He picked up the chalk, fingers calm, and rewrote the problem from memory, line by line. Then silence. He stood in front of it for nearly 15 minutes. Then he began to write. Not fast, not showing off, just steady, precise, one line at a time. The solution unfolded like poetry, not a trick, not a shortcut, but pure understanding, deep, gentle, deliberate. He finished, placed the chalk down, and left the room. What he didn't know, what he couldn't have seen, was that Professor Harlan had been standing silently in the doorway the entire time, watching, eyes wide, breath shallow. His lips parted just slightly. He had written that problem years ago, back when he was younger, arrogant. He had made it unsolvable, a test for himself, a riddle with no answer. Yet here it was, solved, quietly, by a man with no degree, no notes, no announcement, just silence. The next morning, word spread. The equation had been solved. Some believed it, others didn't. But Harlan didn't deny it. He simply walked in, stared at the clean board, and began class as usual. Except that day, he called on Keanu first. "Mr. Reeves," he said, "would you care to explain what you did?" Keanu just shook his head. "The board did the talking," he said softly, and sat back down. But that wasn't the end. That was the beginning. Because Harlan wasn't the only one watching. After the seminar, things didn't go back to normal. Not for Keanu, not for the campus, not for Harlan. Word spread faster than it ever had. Some said the actor had no right solving problems trained professors couldn't. Others said it was a publicity stunt. A few called it luck. But the students knew. The ones who saw it. The ones who felt the air shift when he picked up the chalk. They knew it wasn't a stunt. It was something else. Keanu didn't stay to answer questions. After class, he left through side doors. He still sat in the back, still wore the hoodie, still said little. But now, eyes followed him. Even in silence, his presence made noise. One evening, after the last lecture, Professor Harland found an envelope on his office desk. No stamp, no address. Just one word on the front. Keanu. He hadn't written it. He hadn't seen anyone drop it off. Curious, he turned it over. Light, barely sealed. Inside was a folded letter. He stared at it for a moment, hesitant. But then, something about the handwriting felt personal. He opened it. It wasn't meant for him. It was written in soft blue ink, slanted, careful. Dear Keanu, if you're reading this, it means you're still chasing light in places that feel dark. I'm glad. I know grief takes more than time. I know silence sometimes grows too loud. But math never stops singing, even when we stop listening. So don't stop. Not for them, not for doubt, not even for me. You're more than what they see. Love always, Lucy. Harlan's hands froze. Lucy. He remembered now. Years ago in another city. He had read about a young girl, brilliant, quiet, gifted in math beyond her age, died young. Cancer. She had been described as a prodigy, but her brother never left her side. Keanu. He folded the letter slowly, carefully, like it held breath. He placed it back in the envelope and sealed it again. It wasn't meant for him. But now he understood. The next day, Harland walked into class early. Keanu was already there. Always was. Sitting still in the back, eyes low. The professor said nothing at first. Then he wrote a problem on the board. One no one had seen before. He looked at the class. Today, we won't solve this with rules. Today, we listen to the question. Confused murmurs filled the room. Keanu looked up. The professor turned around. Keanu, he said gently, would you like to take the lead? Keanu hesitated. This wasn't about solving anymore. This was about trust. He walked to the board slowly. The students didn't laugh. They didn't whisper. They just watched. Quietly. He looked at the problem, then turned to them. And instead of solving it, he asked a question. What does it feel like? He said. This problem. Not what it means, but what it feels like. The class blinked. No one spoke. He tapped the board softly. Look at how it moves. Not the numbers. The rhythm. A girl in the front whispered, It looks uneven. Like it's missing something. Keanu smiled gently. Yes. A boy added, It feels unbalanced. Like a question without a voice. Keanu nodded. Good, he said. Now fix it. Not with answers, but with care. And just like that, something shifted. Students didn't just solve. They explored. They opened themselves. They listened. The classroom became something else, a place of silence, of honesty, of discovery. Professor Harland watched from the corner. And for the first time in 30 years, he didn't teach. He learned. After class, Keanu stayed behind. Harland walked over slowly and handed him the envelope. Someone left this for you, he said. Keanu looked at it. His breath caught. He knew the handwriting. He took it without a word, eyes wet but not broken. Thank you, he whispered. But Harlan shook his head. "No," he said. "Thank you." They stood there in the quiet, student and teacher. But maybe, not in that order anymore. That night, Keanu didn't go home. He sat on the library steps with the letter in his hand, moonlight soft above. He didn't open it. He didn't need to. Her words were already inside him. The photo spread faster than the headline ever had. Not because it was shocking, because it was quiet, because it was kind. A solved chalkboard. No audience, no signature, just clean lines, perfect symmetry, and beneath it, one simple sentence in faint handwriting. "He's still listening." Students shared it. Professors whispered about it. And then something changed. A school in another state wrote to Harlan asking about Keanu's teaching style. A university sent a letter asking if he could give a guest lecture, not to prove anything, just to share how he sees. But Harlan didn't reply. Not yet. He had other plans. He called a meeting. Not with the board, not with the higher-ups. He called the students. Every one of them. And they came. They filled the lecture hall. Some stood in the back. Some sat on the floor. Harlan stood at the front and pointed to the board still covered in messages. "What do we do," he asked, "when someone gives more than they take and gets pushed out anyway?" A silence filled the room. Then a voice rose. "We make space." Another student added, "We protect the ones who heal without asking for anything." And that's what they did. The school didn't change policy. The system didn't bend. But the people did. The students, the assistants, even junior professors. They found a small room on the second floor. It used to be a supply closet. They cleaned it out, painted it soft gray, hung a chalkboard that stretched wall to wall. In the corner, they left a wooden chair. Nothing fancy, just solid. And on the table beside it, a box of white chalk and a folded piece of paper. The note said, "This is your room, Keanu. No rules, no noise. Just you, math, and silence. Come when you want. Leave when you need. We'll always be listening." No one knew if he'd come back. But late one night, just after the first rain of the season, a janitor walking past noticed the door slightly open. He peeked in, and there he was, Keanu Reeves. Hoodie pulled low. Writing. Not fast, not flashy, just one line at a time. His face calm, his hands steady, his eyes soft. The board filled slowly with gentle equations, not to show off, not to teach, but to feel, to heal. The janitor didn't say a word. He just closed the door quietly and kept walking. Over the next few weeks, the board kept changing. Some days it was full, some days completely erased. But every time students passed the room, they paused, not to take photos, not to stare, but to feel the quiet, to remember. Because something lived in that room now, not just math, memory, grace, a whisper of what it means to keep going. One morning, Professor Harland came by. He placed a small plaque outside the door. It didn't say Keanu Reeves. It didn't say Math Lab. It said, "The Listening Room." And underneath, in smaller letters, "For those who solve without speaking, for those who heal through numbers, for those who carry loss in silence, and still return with kindness." Keanu never spoke about it publicly, never gave interviews, never explained why he came, or why he stayed. He didn't need to. His work said enough. And over time, students who once feared math began to enter the room. Some left their own notes. Some stayed in silence just to sit where he once sat. And some walked out changed. Not smarter, but more seen. And that was the legacy. Not a solved equation, not a viral moment, but a quiet space where people felt safe enough to begin again. In a world full of noise, Keanu had taught them one simple truth: the deepest math lives in the quiet. Days passed after the panel. Some wrote articles about him. Some uploaded blurry photos of his chalkboard diagrams, trying to break them down frame by frame. But none of that mattered to Keanu. He didn't care about fame. He came back to the classroom, back to the silence, back to the back row. But something had shifted. Students looked at him differently, not with curiosity anymore, with something else, respect. Still, he stayed quiet. Let the numbers speak. Let the lessons unfold without interrupting. But not everyone was happy. Someone had leaked a clip of the panel. Not just any part, but the part where Keanu talked about his sister, his voice soft, his eyes wet. The line where he said, "Math saved me." It spread online like wildfire. Headlines twisted it. Keanu Reeves opens up about tragic past in emotional speech. Keanu Reeves secretly a math genius? The comments were worse. Some mocked him. Some accused him of acting. Some said it was fake grief for attention. He didn't read them, but he felt them. Harlan brought it up one evening. "Are you all right?" he asked. Keanu gave a small nod, but his hands were shaking. He sat on the bench outside the lecture hall long after dark. Hoodie up, head down, his sister's letter in his pocket, a weight he carried like armor. The next day, he didn't come to class, or the day after. Students asked. Harlan didn't answer. Then, on the third day, a man arrived on campus. Older, gray hair, neat suit. He walked into Harlan's office without knocking. "Professor," he said, "we need to talk about Mr. Reeves." Harlan raised an eyebrow. "And you are?" "Director Brooks," the man said. "Board of University Affairs." He placed a folder on the desk. Inside were printed screenshots, articles, comments, emails. "This kind of attention isn't good for the institution," he said. "He's not enrolled. He's not faculty. He doesn't belong here." Harlan didn't respond right away. He looked at the photos, the headlines, the mess someone else made from something pure. "He belongs more than most of us," Harlan finally said. Brooks stood. "I'm asking you to make sure he doesn't return." The next morning, Harlan found Keanu outside, sitting on the stone bench again. He handed him the folder. Keanu didn't open it. He already knew. "You want me to leave?" he said. "No," Harlan replied softly. "They do." Keanu looked up at the sky. "I should have never spoken." Harlan shook his head. "No. You just spoke to people who didn't know how to listen." But Keanu was quiet now. Too quiet. He stood slowly. "Thank you," he said. And he walked away. Not angry. Just tired. He didn't come back that week. The bench stayed empty. The seat in the back row cold. But something strange happened. Students started writing notes on the chalkboard before class, not equations, messages. "Thank you, Keanu. Math feels different now. Come back." Hundreds of them. Sticky notes, scraps, drawings, until the whole wall was covered. Professor Harlan walked in one morning and couldn't find space to write, so he left the board untouched and let their words speak instead. He knew Keanu might not see it, but maybe someone who needed to would, and maybe that was enough. But then, on a Sunday morning, Harlan's phone buzzed. Unknown number. No message. Just a photo. A chalkboard. Solved from corner to corner. Not from the university, but from a high school classroom across the city. A note underneath. He's still listening. The campus had a rhythm. Doors opening, laughter echoing, heels on tile, notebooks flipping. But that rhythm shifted after that morning. Something changed. Students walked slower past the math building. They paused near room 304, pretending to tie their shoes or check their phones just to catch a glimpse of him. Keanu Reeves, the man who didn't speak much, who wore the same hoodie, who walked like he didn't want attention but carried a weight that pulled eyes toward him anyway. No one asked why he was there. Not directly, but whispers spread like wind. Did you hear he solved it? Professor Harlan didn't even argue. But he's just an actor, right? Some were curious, some jealous, some laughed behind their hands. But Keanu didn't react. He walked the halls with the same silence he brought to the classroom. Respectful, invisible, yet unforgettable. That afternoon, Professor Harlan invited him to his office, not in front of others, quietly. A simple folded note passed through a student assistant. No signature, no pressure, just an open door. Keanu showed up an hour early. The office was dim. Books towered like walls, formulas on the whiteboard behind the desk. 2 chairs, no pretenses. "Have a seat," Harlan said, his voice lower than usual. Keanu did. They didn't speak for a moment. The ticking clock filled the space. Then Harlan leaned forward. Not like a teacher, not like a critic, but like a man who finally saw something rare. "That equation," he said. "How long did it take you to understand it?" Keanu looked at him gently. "I never understood it," he said. "I just listened to it." Harlan tilted his head. "You listened?" Keanu nodded. "Math has sound, if you stop trying to force it." The professor didn't know how to respond. He leaned back slowly. Something inside him, something sharp, softened a little. "Where did you learn math like that?" he asked. Keanu stared at the books lining the wall. "Grief," he said. And that was the first time Harlan had no comeback. He wanted to ask more, but he didn't. He knew enough. Some pain didn't need retelling. Instead, he reached into his drawer and pulled out a folded paper. "There's a seminar tomorrow," he said. "A panel of visiting professors. I want you to sit in, listen, maybe speak." Keanu shook his head. "I don't belong in rooms like that." Harlan smiled, not unkindly. "Neither do half the people in them." Keanu stood, nodded respectfully. "I'll think about it." He left the office as quietly as he entered. That night, he didn't sleep. He walked the campus alone under the pale glow of street lamps. He stopped by the old lecture hall, sat on the stone steps. His eyes traced the windows like memories lived behind the glass. He thought about the seminar. He thought about grief. He thought about the one person who used to talk to him in numbers, not words. His sister. The one who whispered math like lullabies when he couldn't sleep. Gone now. But her voice lived in the spaces between numbers, in the silence between chalk strokes, in the patterns that danced across blackboards. That's why he came here, not to prove anything, but to remember, to be close to what he lost. The next morning he arrived early at the seminar room, not because he said yes, but because he couldn't say no to what math had given him back. The room was filled with scholars, polished shoes, ties, heavy notebooks, laptops open like shields. They didn't notice him at first, until Harlan pointed him out. "We have someone here who sees math differently," he said. Some turned their heads. Others scoffed. "Isn't that the actor?" one whispered. "What's he doing here?" said another. Keanu didn't flinch. Harlan ignored them. "Keanu, would you mind showing them what you showed me?" A pause. Then Keanu walked up, not to the board, but to the window. He pointed outside, to the tree branches swaying, to the way shadows fell on the concrete. "That's math," he said softly. People frowned, confused. He turned to the board, picked up the chalk, and began drawing. Not an equation, but a pattern, curves, shapes, movements. Then he placed the final number at the corner. And suddenly it made sense. Someone in the back gasped. The equation they thought was abstract became a map, a reflection of something alive. The room went still. One professor stood up. "Who taught you this?" Keanu looked at the chalk in his hand. "Someone who understood silence better than anyone." And then he sat down, just like that. No performance, no ego, just truth. By the next week, the whispers had turned into invitations, emails, letters, even hand-delivered envelopes with golden seals, universities, think tanks, conferences. They all wanted the same thing. Keanu Reeves. Not for a movie, not for a spotlight, but for his mind, or maybe his mystery. Some were curious, some were competitive, and a few were desperate to prove he was wrong. Professor Harland brought him one envelope in person. It was from the National Mathematical Panel, the biggest annual gathering of math scholars in the country, usually invite-only. Very formal, very elite. Keanu held it in his hands like it was made of glass. "Why me?" he asked. Harland gave a soft smile. "Because you're asking the questions no one else is brave enough to ask." Keanu nodded slowly, but his eyes looked distant. He hadn't been on a stage in a while. Not this kind of stage. Not one where the people watching didn't clap just because they liked you. This was different, colder, sharper. Still, he said yes. Not for himself, but for Lucy. The day of the panel arrived. A tall, modern auditorium, white marble, velvet seats, big screens, and bigger egos. Keanu wore the same hoodie. Clean, but unchanged. As he stepped into the green room backstage, a few eyes turned. Some smiled politely. Others didn't. "Is that the actor?" someone said under their breath. "What's he doing here?" Keanu stood near the wall, quiet. Then Dr. Leon came in. The keynote speaker. A man known worldwide for his harsh opinions and sharp mind. He saw Keanu and laughed. "Ah, the Hollywood genius," he said. "Did they run out of real mathematicians?" A few chuckled. Keanu didn't react. Dr. Leon stepped closer. "This isn't a movie set," he said. "We don't do scripts. We do logic." Keanu looked at him gently. "Then you'll have no problem listening." Dr. Leon blinked, surprised, but said nothing more. On stage, introductions began. Speakers walked up, one by one. Complex theories, dense slides, numbers flying fast. The room nodded, clapped, yawned. Then it was Keanu's turn. No slideshow, no mic in his hand. Just him. And a single piece of chalk placed beside the board. He walked to the center, paused, looked around. "I'm not here to prove anything," he said softly. Some shifted in their seats. "I'm just here to show you something." He turned to the board and drew a curve, then another, then a single line cutting across them. He spoke slowly. "This is how my sister taught me to see motion, not with numbers first, with feeling." Someone scoffed. "Math isn't emotion," Dr. Leon called out. Keanu turned to him, not angry, just steady. "Neither is light, but we feel it when it hits our skin." The room went quiet. Then he began drawing again. Complex now, weaving ideas into shapes, not to impress, but to guide. He showed how symmetry lived inside pain, how balance was found in brokenness, how even the most twisted equations craved harmony. People leaned in. One professor whispered, "This isn't teaching, it's healing." Keanu finished, placed the chalk down. "I'm not a mathematician," he said, "but math saved me." He stepped back. No applause at first, just stillness. Then a few stood up, then more, until the whole room rose in silence. Dr. Leon stayed seated, but even he didn't speak. After the panel, in the hallway, a young woman approached Keanu, shy, nervous, holding a worn-out notebook. "I lost someone too," she said quietly. "I stopped doing math after that." Keanu looked at her. "Maybe now you start again," he said. She nodded, tears in her eyes. And just like that, the math world didn't just hear from him. They felt him.